geht es mir wie Ihnen. Ich freue mich auf das Bühnengespräch und ich möchte Ihnen als erstes die Moderatorin vorstellen. Es ist Silvia Bahl von der Universität der Künste in Berlin. Herzlich willkommen. Writer and editor Louise Kugelberg.
Anyway, hi again.
Hi. Okay, now the mic is working.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
better.
Okay, so let me start again.
Maybe we should wait a moment.
All right. Well, thanks anyways for this intense journey into the mind of Vincent van Gogh. My question was about the script writing process, because you started with the paintings, right? You didn't start with the historical dates or the biography of Vincent van Gogh, but you really interested with the pictures. But how do you translate those paintings into a script? And you both wrote it together, so maybe you can share some thoughts on the script writing.
Well, we didn't want to make a forensic biography. We didn't want to make a biography at all. And there have been so many movies about Vincent van Gogh that why should anybody make another one? So we didn't really want to make a movie about Vincent van Gogh. So we didn't. What happened was there was an exhibition of paintings by Van Gogh and drawings by Antonin Artaud that was at the Musée d'Orsay about 5 years ago. And as I was walking through the museum with Jean-Claude Carrier, who is a great screenwriter, he wrote Belle de Jour and the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, Pour Cyrano de Bergerac, and the screenplay. But anyway, he's 87. We were looking at the paintings and we thought, well, when you look at paintings in a show, you have an experience with each painting, and then at the end you walk out and you have an accumulative sense of what the artist was doing. And I thought, okay, well, if we write a script like that, where we have, say, there's 15 paintings, or 15 vignettes of what could have happened in each one of these scenes, and then we wrote the scenes. So where people would think, oh, well, we know everything about Van Gogh, why not make a movie about him where you make this stuff up, and then people don't know what that is, or they could think, well, that might have happened. So that was our approach. And once we had these vignettes, I was seeing a movie in my head that was a bit different than Jean-Claude. Louise understood what I wanted to do, and so essentially what she did was she took all of these scenes and put them in an order and turned the vignettes into a narrative. And then what we did is, he did not come with us when we went to shoot the movie, so a lot of the, for example, part of the script said, he walks in nature. That's a very short sentence. In a script, you have 80 pages in a script instead of 120 pages. What happened with the other 40 pages? So essentially, when we went to Auch, we needed to find that walk. And she basically took me on that walk, and he can tell you about it,
But this was also an opportunity to tell a story, not in a normal way where you're the third person watching the movie. We also want to tell a story in the first person, so you were seeing the world through Vincent van Gogh's voice and was going on the walks with him and seeing the nature and meeting the people that were speaking directly to the audience.
I think the cutting process was especially fascinating because the camera was constantly moving around the bodies. And there's this scene when Van Gogh is moving through the fields and there's a cross-cutting and the field really becomes like an abstract painting. Or there are also overlapping pictures in the end of the movie when Van Gogh is talking to his brother and their faces dissolve, for example. And there's also a certain relation between closeness and distance. How did you work in the editing between those two layers? I mean, being very close, very physical, and then horizontal again, and seeing the landscape.
Well, essentially, when people talk to him, I don't know what
You have to come
when people
more
talk,
to the table.
when people talk to Vincent, they're talking to the camera. And so when he looks at them, it's as if he was looking at them as if he would make a painting of them. When he's not with people, he's in his own reverie. And usually when he meets somebody, they interrupt that. So each time somebody intervenes into his reality, it's a confrontation. And so in most movies, if you have a certain kind of point of view, it's reflected in the reverse when people do that. But we didn't want to do that, so it didn't conform to that because we didn't want him to look back at them. So on occasion he does when, for example, Vincent is talking to Dr. Ray, the young doctor, after he cut his ear off. It's as if really the painting with the pipe is actually talking to you. And so we saw the film as a sculpture. And so, for example, when you have a screen, sometimes you have images and sometimes you don't. So we cut to black, interrupted whatever the narrative was. The audience can step out of the film, re-enter the film again, and recalibrate. And when it goes black, Louise was saying, you hear him talking to himself. When you close your eyes, that's what you see. You're not seeing images, and so there's a catalog of different kinds of images. There's images you see when your eyes are closed. There's things you see when you're alone or when you're looking at nature, and then there's things that you see when people interrupt that. And so I think Willem had the opportunity to, most characters in movies are the same with everybody, but I don't behave the same with my wife. I don't behave with somebody that I don't know well. And so in a different situation, when he was talking to Matt Nicholson, who was the priest, he was talking to Emmanuel Senier, who was owned the restaurant, or whoever, he is, and all of the scenes are shot in real time. So basically it takes 11 minutes to talk to the priest. It takes 6 minutes to talk to the doctor. And so there's a reality to it. Obviously it's an artificial reality, but a reality to it that becomes a stasis. I don't know if it's a movie, but it operates in some way. You have this illusion that you get close to this person and you are participating. When he says, I am my paintings, he is his painting. And the reason why we did the movie is those paintings speak to you still. People's paintings do that pretty good.
It's very interesting that you mentioned the black screen. The film starts with a black screen, and Van Gogh is talking about his isolation. I mean, it's really a painful isolation because he has this intense perceptions, but he can't share it with anyone. So all this energy that builds up inside him, that seeks expression, goes just in his paintings, maybe. Do you mean that when you say stasis, is that a kind of standstill, maybe, that you wanted to express by the structure with the black screens?
Well, I think the film is a stasis. I think painting is a stasis. I think language, when it's a poem, is a stasis. It's an accumulation of moments and elements that are suspended, and in that anything can happen. Hopefully, if there's a poetic to them, they go past the elements that comprise them. But I think that editing, one thing that in most movies, I guess, when people edit the movie, they try to make it as smooth as possible. When we were doing it, I think that our approach had to do with observing observation. If you think of Van Gogh's paintings, maybe the reason why people didn't like them at the time was because they could see how they were painted. That became the thing that is really what is great about them, because you see how they're painted, but you still can't comprehend why they are so good. We shot in the Louvre. Van Gogh never saw a painting by Velázquez or Goya. They weren't Goya paintings or Velázquez paintings at the Louvre yet. But it was more interesting for us to show, in looking at Goya and Velázquez, and say Gustave Doré or Millet, that were supposed to be people that he was interested in, because they're not so interesting as painters. So we took some liberties to tell the story that we wanted to tell.
It's also very interesting because you really show the artistic process, how pictures are painted, and I think how you see it. I mean, you really have to learn how to see, and I think you instructed Willem Dafoe also how to paint, and you start with a line, and it's fascinating how this line becomes a field of intensity, and the two shoes suddenly this bunch of lines. So. This is really interesting how you show the process of seeing, also at the scene with Velázquez, because you're not focusing on the whole picture, but on the part of it, right, and the forces that build it up.
So one of the problems or goals or the things that we wanted to convey is, I mean, obviously it had to look like the actor was actually painting, which he was. So he learned how to paint, so he could hold the brush the right way, he could use the materials in a way that would be believable. That you don't usually see in the movie, so being a painter, I could kind of help him along with that. But I think that there's a drama that exists. I mean, he goes into that crummy room and the way she cut the movie together, and he walks from this part to that, and they're just a collection of moments. And then he turns that into this painting of these shoes. I think everybody in the audience wants to see if it's going to look like shoes when he gets done. And it's funny how dramatic that could be. But I don't know what you want to talk about, but maybe people might have questions.
Yeah, we can open up the discussions, sure. Do you have any questions or impressions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the movie. It was really great. And so for me, Dafoe is one of the best leading actors. And so I cannot imagine someone else for that movie and for this movie. And so what's your original idea? Did you have him in mind from the beginning?
Okay. Yes. He was the only person that I wanted to have to play the movie, and in the movie. And nobody wanted him to play Van Gogh because they thought he was too old. He's 63 and Van Gogh was 37. But in those days, the expectancy for Mal was 42 and he was 37, and now it's 82 and he's 63, so it's about right. But you have to think that when Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken went to Vietnam in The Deer Hunter, they were 35 years old. So age really doesn't mean anything. Yeah. He's a great actor. He's physical. He's smart. He's loyal. You can trust him. You can collaborate with him. And I think and I've known him for 30 years, but what he did was something that, even though we wrote the script, we put him in that situation. What he did was something that was beyond language, and it was beyond something that I could have imagined. So once you do get somebody in that state, you get out of the way and let them do what they're going to do, even if they're saying the lines. He did an amazing job. Yes, girl with the blonde.
Why did you support the film by
Why did we support the film by piano music?
Very beautiful piano music.
I felt like that music felt like it was his interior dialogue. And someone also asked, well, you're showing nature, how come we don't hear the sounds of nature? Well, the only time we really interrupt the sound of the piano is when you hear the wind once in a while, or the rustle of the leaves, because there's a lot of wind in Hall. But I never thought about having any other music, and I always heard that music in my head when we were making the film. And so Tatiana Lazowskaya, who made the music, made that music not following the images. She just made it by herself, except for this one piece that is the theme where there's the violin, where she plays the violin. I played a couple of chords on the piano, and then Paul Cantelon turned that into the theme song. But hear music in my head.
More questions?
Anybody else?
Impressions. How did you like the film? What moved you especially?
That's a good question.
Yes, please.
Yeah? Yes. You want to know about the camera, or you want to say something? Thank you. We wanted to show his point of view, and we wanted to isolate his point of view. So I went to a vintage shop and bought some sunglasses. I didn't know that they were bifocals when I went into the shop, so when I walked out and looked on the floor, there was a step in the grass. And I thought, wow, okay, this is good. And I sent the sunglasses to the director of photography, asked him to put the lens on the camera. It was a little small for the lens, so we had to make a split diopter. I don't think anybody has 20/20 vision. I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm wearing glasses right now. The side of what I'm seeing is not clear. And I guess when I made a movie called The Diving Bell and Butterfly, I experimented with a swing and tilt lens, which I felt was more human. And so we used this split diopter to show Van Gogh's point of view and separate him from the objectivity in the movie. And then sometimes we put a yellow lens on it. I felt like putting a yellow gel on it, and there was no real logic to it. We didn't try to make the movie look like his paintings. We just wanted it to feel like it was alive. Anybody else? Yes.
Very deeply, I never saw such beautiful colors corresponding with life.
She's saying that the color in our movie touched her so deeply, she never, I have to repeat the question, never she saw a color corresponding to images so profoundly and beautifully in a film. Thank you. I liked it too. There's one moment for it, but there's no logic to it really, because when he runs out of the asylum, and all of a sudden you have that lens, and then it turns yellow, and the trees start going back and forth. You feel like he's very excited, but at a certain moment he runs into his own point of view, and the trees are cut in half, and I think it's an opportunity. I think we looked at this, making a movie about Van Gogh, as an opportunity to make a movie about where anything could happen.
I'm missing the English word, Sehgewohnheit. Dieser Film offenbart eine neue Sehgewohnheit.
This film creates a new vision by itself, like a habit of seeing,
A way of seeing. Well, I think that Willem felt like he saw things differently after we made the movie.
The end, I always thought, murdered himself. This is a special thing for you to tell it, or to make this as a discussion.
Well, we believe that he didn't shoot himself, and there's quite a lot of evidence. For instance, the people saw him coming from another direction, not from the wheat field, but from Chapelville. So, for instance, in the movie, after he got shot and he's walking home, you see these people watching him. Also, he ordered a bunch of paint the day before, and they never found his painting or his easel. And yeah.
And what's so interesting is that the people that are adamant about him killing himself for some reason are adamant about it. And we're not trying to prove anything. I don't think that's an issue, really, in being able to watch the movie. But the more that we've kind of done this, and the more people say, well, what about this or what about that? They're going to auction the gun off now that supposedly killed Van Gogh, or that he shot himself with. It was found in 1965. He killed himself supposedly in 1890. What happened to the gun for 75 years? If he shot himself, did he bury it after he shot himself? I mean, or did he throw it into another field that was real far away after he shot himself? He also, what happened to his paints and his the materials he took with him every day? He came home without them. In the movie, I mean, this is maybe it's boring talking about this, but people seem to be fascinated with it. Martin Bailey, who is supposed to be an expert in this department, would say he didn't paint when he was depressed. And why would you minimize the idea that if a man felt so bad that he would kill himself, then you say that's not important? Well, if he made 75 paintings in 80 days, I'd say he felt pretty damn good. So why would he kill himself when things were going so well? He also wrote that he thought suicide was cowardice. But he wouldn't turn away from death if it came to him. And the language that's in the scene at the end is taken from the police transcript where he said, "Don't blame anybody." Why would he say that? Have you ever had a gun? No, never. Did you kill yourself? I don't know. Maybe. So this is more of a situation like Rashomon. You have one event, 5 different people are witnesses, there are 5 different stories. But for us, I think that was a great, I like the idea that these guys shot him and he didn't tell on them. He was alive for 30 hours and he was a stand-up guy and he didn't tell on them. I thought he was very dignified in that. And I think that when people say he wasn't successful, I think when he's sitting in the dirt and he eats the dirt and he sits up and he's smiling, he's exactly in the right place at the right time. And I think he did exactly what he wanted to do, which was to express the inexpressible. So, and there was another thing about the ledger. Usually if you're sitting in the movie and people read that they discovered the ledger 126 years later. What is that? That's cool. Sounds good, I like it. Somebody showed him some kindness and he actually returned the kindness, but they didn't receive the book until 126 years later. Maybe it was 116 years later. But in a movie, isn't that a great story that somebody would give somebody something and they would not get it back, and then at the end you can read that. The audience likes that kind of stuff. Do I know if it's real or not? Ronald Pickvance, who did the show at the Met, 84 years old when he died, wrote the prelude, the preface to that book. And Bohemia Welsh, who's about 75, was not looking to sensationalize something. So I think that at some moment, if the Van Gogh Museum authenticates the ledger, then it'll be fine. But for us, we're not forensic biographers. We thought it was a good thing in a movie, and I like it.
There's also this interesting scene where he is talking to a soldier in the asylum, and you included that aspect of colonial past of France. And this is also a kind of violence that haunts the film in a way, because he is tormented by outer violence, but also inner violence that haunts him. So maybe some thoughts on Tonkin and why you included that scene.
Basically, the war in Vietnam was going on when Van Gogh was alive. Tonkin is Indochina. And so what we tried to do was reflect different possibilities of what he could have talked about. I mean, we know that Van Gogh knew how to read in English, spoke German, French. So we wanted to show that he was an erudite guy. And so Jean-Claude Carrier wanted to have him say, I think Shakespeare is the most mysterious of all writers. And so we get a chance to talk about Richard III, and also when Niels Arestrup, who was the guy who was in the tub next to him with the tattoo on his face, actually Jean-Claude Carrier was the secretary to the general in Algeria. So basically he transposed his experience as the secretary to the general to that character. And at the end, we'd have conversations about things all the time. And one day we were talking about Christ, and he said to me, if you know the Gospels, you know that nobody knew who Christ was until 30 or 40 years after he died. I mean, there's not even a letter from a Roman centurion to his wife in Rome that a guy named Jeshua was crucified with 2 criminals, nothing. But okay, that sounds like dialogue to me. So we put that in the movie. So we get to have, and also probably thinking about the Master and Margarita when he talks about Christ being on the terrace and Pontius Pilate not wanting to crucify him. It opened up a bunch of possibilities about talking about ideas in the 19th century, even the conversation between Gauguin and Van Gogh about the field. Yeah. And the field is dormant until somebody illuminates it by standing in front of it. The way when we look at a painting, it's dead until we see it. And when that happens, it becomes alive. And so...
yeah, they both have a somehow different point of view on representation in paintings, but somehow they're very close, but later they split. Gauguin is more in his mind, he wants to turn inside, but Van Gogh, he wants to escape his inside, so he's always thinking in the outside, and so they are close, but still they miss each other in a way. Gauguin leaves and he's devastated because of that. I mean,
but there was something also that we want to show in the movie, the relationship between Vincent and Gauguin, because often in other movies Gauguin is sort of an asshole, but the letters in the movie is real letters that Gauguin wrote to Van Gogh, both the letter when he's in the asylum and the letter in the end. So yeah, as I said, they were very, very close.
You can see how important friendship is. When people are involved in the same practice, even though their practice is different, they have more in common than other people. I mean, Eve Nerve was sitting in the audience. I've known him for what, 35 years, 40 years. We know each other for 40 years. And our paintings are quite different. But we have more to say to each other than 99% of the people that are there just because we are engaged in a similar practice that is really so deep that that's why it was so devastating for Van Gogh when Gauguin left. I mean, he finally had somebody to talk to. He had somebody who he actually cared what they thought. We could share that with him. There's one thing that happened here that we have that never happened to him, is we actually can have an audience. We can talk to you. We can talk about it. We can observe something together. That he never had. And making a movie about somebody like that really exacerbates that sensation that it's quite a privilege. It might be a distraction also. But it's amazing what you accomplish.
And especially with filmmaking, I mean, is there a difference for you when you paint a picture? Is this a more isolated process, or is this a cliche that filmmaking is a collaborative thing and painting is very lonesome and there's this artist that struggles with his gestures and the material? How different are those processes for you when you work?
And it's definitely collaborative.
Yeah.
I mean, Louise can do something I can't, and Willem can do something I can't, and Ben Waddellum can do something I can't do, and all together, and Willem can do something I can't do. But together, we can do something from the same mindset and posit that somewhere we can contribute to what that thing is. And that kind of dialogue, or that way of working, it's very fulfilling if you can do it with someone where you really are not fighting with them all the time. And it's hard to do that. But, for example, when we wanted to make this movie, I saw Van Gogh's shoes, and I thought that I wanted his feet to walk up the screen. So I wanted him to walk through wheat fields, but in September in France, there were no wheat fields, so we had to send the director of photography to Scotland. So he went to Scotland, and he wore Van Gogh's pants and his shoes and his hat in case there was a camera shadow. And we asked him to photograph his feet. So we had 6 hours of him shooting his feet, walking through grass. We used a couple, less than a minute probably. But when he was doing that, we were looking at it and we thought, when is he gonna look natural? And so finally, out of all of that, we found something, and he came back to France, and I said, start to film like you're seeing. Stop looking like you're filming. And ultimately what happened is we kind of became the same person. Benoit, Louise, Willem, and me all kind of, we run off because what would happen is sometimes there's too many people in a camera crew and they get in the way. So we would go off because we'd have a couple of hours left of daylight. We had a short shooting schedule because we lost some money when we were making the movie. So we would invent situations and that, yeah.
And Benoit also built a handle so he can run with the camera. He could shoot very freely. For instance, sometimes when Willem was delivering dialogue and Julian saw a cloud coming by, he was like, "Oh, shoot the cloud!" And Willem went up in the air. But so it was we were very free in that sense that we could really go out in the nature and just walk around and find all these beautiful moments. And yeah, the scene in the nature was actually the hardest bit for me to edit because we ended up with so much material.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at one point when the scene was 19 minutes long. But we couldn't have a movie with silence for 19 minutes, so we had to edit it.
Okay.
Anyway.
So, I think...
Yes, this person was...
Yeah, one last question maybe.
Yes.
There was one scene in black and white, and I wondered why.
Okay. I wondered why too. We had an infrared film, and when Gogh said to him, "Your paintings look like sculpture," and this was in Van Gogh's head, one way of getting into his head was to show how the painting, how it looked to him. And so also it was a way to show him painting. I think what happens when you look at the image of the trees in black and white and you got rid of the color, you saw it spatially. In fact, you couldn't tell if the painting was the trees or the part that was on the left side of the painting was the tree. And so, and then you see him paint, and that's Willem painting also, you see him painting the dark marks in it, and you sort of see the paint sitting on the surface like that. And yeah, I thought, okay, maybe that's a little weird that it's black and white for a moment, but I also felt like it was quite, maybe the movie turned into an Ingmar Bergman film for a second. But the more we've seen it, the more I like it.
But again, like you said before, it's a form also seeing and tell different way how to look at something and how to see.
Okay, one last question then, please.
I just have to tell you something. I promised my friend that I say this to you, that for her, you did the best poem with a butterfly and in her world what she has.
What's your friend's name?
Karen. Her name is Karen.
You told her you were going to tell me that. She asked you to tell me that. Did she ask you to tell me that?
Yes.
I promised her that I tell it to you.
Thank you, Karen. Wherever you are.
Okay.
Okay, everybody?
So-
Yes, any more? Yes, I'm sorry.
I wonder, when Van Gogh is lying in the coffin,
Yes.
the camera focused on his hand, and his hand for me is waiting for his ankle.
Yeah.
I do not know how it looks from
Right.
the middle.
Yes, yes.
Seems to grow.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you're on the corner now.
There was nothing we did.
It has nothing to do with eternity or...
Yeah, it does have some, we're all facing eternity right now. Some of us sooner, some of us later, but I mean, we're all in eternity's gate.
Okay. So thank you both for coming here tonight.